Postgraduate Work Permit, or popularly called as PGWP, is a valid open work permit which authorizes the students who have completed their college education in Canada to be able to work after graduating. Since this is a valid work permit, a valid temporary status accorded to the students, any experience that you gain under this temporary status is counted towards your Canadian experience class. So, for example, if you have completed 1 year of Canadian experience as a PGWP holder, you do qualify as a CEC. So, see here, the screen that I'm showing here, it basically clearly says that if you have done a full-time work for a year in Canada under a valid temporary residence status, then you may qualify for Canadian experience class, provided you satisfy other conditions like your language and all those things. So many of the PGWP holders are interested in Alberta PNP, and I have seen those questions coming through in my WhatsApp, in my YouTube comments, and everywhere. So I just thought, why not create a video where I just show the requirements of each of the Alberta PNP streams and how it deals with the subject of PGWP, or the postgraduate work permit. Okay, as we know, Alberta PNP is a very popular stream for people looking to migrate to Canada, and a lot of these people are PGWP holder. Since Alberta has multiple streams, it gets a bit tricky, and the person with a PGWP or this kind of an open work permits needs to clearly understand what the requirements are as far as their work experience is concerned. Would their work experience be relevant? Would it be considered? And there are many questions in their mind. So I just thought, why not do this explainer video? I did a similar explainer video a bit earlier where I was giving more of a theoretical kind of a lesson, but in this, I will walk you through the detail and the actual eligibility requirements of each of the streams so that you can check for yourself whether you are eligible or not. Okay, so let's quickly go into the details. First, I will take the example of AOS. Okay, let's take the example of AOS, or the Alberta Opportunity Stream. Alberta Opportunity Stream is for people who are already living and working in Alberta. So that is a very important caveat. But many PGWP holders would also be able to satisfy this basic condition. So if you have PGWP experience and you're already living and working in Alberta, what does the eligibility say about your case? So let's go into the details of of AOS and start looking at the PGWP requirements. So the first mention of the first eligibility that AOS deals with PGWP is it recognizes PGWP as a valid work permit. So as long as your PGWP is held by a graduate of an Alberta Advanced Education AE, you that kind of work permit is considered a valid work permit. So if you look at the eligibility here, valid work permits, it's under the topic of valid work permits. It recognizes postgraduate work permit held by a graduate of an Alberta Advanced Education institution. Right? So the first question is answered. If PGWP is a valid work permit as far as Alberta AOS is concerned. Okay. However, there are some other conditions also that needs to be satisfied apart from a PGWP from a graduate of an Alberta Advanced Education institution. So if you have a PGWP from a non-Alberta advanced from a non-Alberta institution, your work permit is not considered will not be considered for AOS, even though if you are living and working in Alberta. It basically means that if you have gained your experience under PGWP and you were in a college in a different province, that experience will not be counted. Okay. So again, since the PGWP is an open work permit, it must be held by the it must be held by graduate of a Alberta advanced education institution. Okay, so this is the first dealing of PGWP as far as AOS is concerned. Next, if we keep going, we see the second mention of PGWP as a occupation requirement. So AOS lays down occupation requirements for PGWP holders. So if you are a PGWP holder, your occupation must be related to your field of study in Alberta. Again, as we looked at the validity of the work permit, PGWP would only be relevant for people who have studied in Alberta in a way. If you but the work that you are doing, the experience that you have gained as a PGWP, it should be related to your field of study that you did in Alberta, right? So your occupation or your NOC, basically every occupation translates to NOC, but the kind of work you are doing and the kind of education you had must be related. It cannot be totally unrelated, right? So you have to make sure that the occupation that you are getting into is related to your field of study. Okay. How okay. And there is one caveat here that if you have done a 1 year post diploma certificate kind of education, if your education is like you have just done a 1 year post diploma certificate, then then your occupation should be related to your actual postgraduate a post secondary field of studies outside of Canada. So for example, if you have studied business administration outside of Canada and you did only a 1 year certificate or a post diploma certificate in Canada, then your occupation should relate to your post secondary education also. Okay. This is only for a smaller case where you have done a 1 year course. If you have done a full-time course in Canada, then the above condition would be valid, where your education, your field of study in Canada should be related to your occupation in Canada, or let me say in Alberta to be very specific. Okay, so this is the second aspect of PGWP as far as AOS is concerned. Let's keep going and see what are the other requirements of PGWP holders. So the next section that PGWP deals with is the education requirements for a PGWP holder. We have already discussed that the PGWP holders must be issued, or your degree must be issued by an Alberta Advanced Education Institution. This we have established in the previous 2 points, right? And the next point basically uh, uh, elaborates on the type of credentials that would be eligible. So if you are doing any kind of education in Alberta, then these are the type of credentials that would be considered. So your credentials should be one of these, right? Either a certificate of post diploma certificate, or a diploma program of at least 2 years, undergraduate bachelor degree, a graduate level degree, a graduate level certificate, or a graduate level diploma. However, done if you started attending your college after April of 2019, like 4 years back, then I'm sorry, then a 1 year certificate is no longer eligible. Okay, so that's the only difference you will see here. Here you will see that the certificate of diploma is certificate, post diploma certificate, and the post baccalaureate certificate of 1 year was is eligible if your college started before April 19. But after that, only post-diploma certificate and a post-baccalaureate certificate is eligible. The certificate of 1 year is not available or not eligible for this program. So here the AOS details deals with PGWP's education requirement. What kind of education requirements are eligible? Next, if we keep going and come to the work experience requirements, here here also it deals with what kind of work experience that the PGWP holder has accumulated is eligible for is eligible for AOS. So you need a PGWP holder needs to have at least 6 months of full-time work experience in your current occupation in the last 18 months, or basically 1.5 years. So you should have at least half year of experience, half year of full-time experience in the last 1.5 years of your occupation in Alberta. Again, this is your work experience in Alberta because AOS is for people who have work experience in Alberta. Okay, so that's the important point. And then the following points here, the following bullet points here is basically applicable to all applicants, including postgraduate PGWP holders, that it should be a full-time, not a part-time work. It should be in the same occupation as your current occupation. It should be on a valid work status, which PGWP is, and it cannot be gained while studying in Canada. So if you have done any kind of part-time work while you were studying in Canada, it will not help. It will not qualify. Okay. And if you are a PGWP holder and if your job or the work that you have done needed any kind of licensing, registration, any kind of trade certificate, you should have those documentation or certificates licensing in place. This goes without saying because you should be doing valid legal work. Okay. If we keep going after this, PGWP job offers, uh, this section deals with what kind of job offer is required for PGWP, and it basically says that all experience, right? It basically says that all kind of PGWP experience is a valid, all kind of job offers is eligible for PGWP, is applicable for PGWP, and the same conditions that would apply to any other applicant would apply to a PGWP job offer. Like it should be for a continuous work, it should be for a full-time work, should be for at least 12 months and more, and things like that. You need to meet the wages and benefits requirements, which I covered in one of my earlier videos. Okay. So if you see this is the end of the eligibility for AOS, and we see that as far as AOS is concerned, it has a lot of PGWP specific details. So if you have PGWP from Alberta, make sure that you go through the details of this AOS program before applying so that you don't make a mistake and come up and land into trouble. So in short, in my opinion, what this AOS streams says about PGWP is that as long as you have a PGWP from Alberta, you have a very high chance of succeeding in this particular stream, because if you have a PGWP from outside Alberta, though that won't be recognized for AOS purpose, only for AOS purpose. You can still be eligible for Canadian Experience Class CEC, right? But for AOS, since AOS doesn't go through express entry, it has its own rules for PGWP. Okay. Next, that's a good segue of going into the Alberta Express Entry. Alberta Express Entry, again, a very popular method of Alberta PNP, which runs multiple substreams like dedicated healthcare pathway and the Alberta Tech pathway. Here, understand this. Alberta General Express Entry or Alberta Express Entry basically piggybacks on the back of IRCC's Express Entry pool. So you need to have your express entry profile with a minimum score and all those eligibility. You should be eligible for express entry, and then you can be eligible for Alberta express entry either through application or through selection. I have done a lot of videos on Alberta Express Entry. You can have a look into that. But in general, I would just explain you. In general, it's it it's driven by your Express Entry profile. Once you create your Express Entry profile, and if you have a minimum score, and if you have expressed your interest in Alberta, then a window of opportunity for under Alberta Express Entry opens up for you. Okay. Now, if I go through this particular eligibility, Alberta Express Entry eligibility, there is no mention of PGWP or a postgraduate work permit in the eligibility. The only thing it mentions about a graduate from a Canadian institution is that if you have a Canadian degree, it increases your chances of selection under the Alberta Express Entry. Okay, so that's the only mention you will see. So if you have a PGWP, you get no advantage and you need not worry. If you are thinking of applying under Alberta Express Entry, you need not worry. There are no special conditions that you need to satisfy. You just need to satisfy the conditions of Canadian Experience class or your foreign skilled worker thing in your Express Entry. Right? So if you are eligible for Express Entry, given other conditions, you can be eligible for your Alberta Express Entry too. Okay. Very good. So Alberta Express Entry is pretty straightforward as far as PGWP is concerned. You get no you get no special treatment and you have no special eligibility requirement. Okay, and this is applicable to all of its substreams, including the tech pathway, dedicated healthcare pathway, and things like that. Okay, let's go to the next stream, the very popular rural renewal scheme. Okay, the rural renewal scheme is again something which is run exclusively by Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. It's not a express entry based program, so it has its own set of eligibility rules. Okay, so here if you go through the eligibility requirements for the rural renewal scheme, the only mention of the only mention that you get of PGWP is that if you have completed a 2-year post-secondary education program in the designated rural community, then you don't need to meet the 12 months of work experience criteria. Okay, so let me explain it this way. In rural renewal scheme, there is a work experience requirement that you must have a minimum of 12 months of full-time work experience within the last 18 months to be able to qualify for the rural renewal scheme. Okay, and this can begin anywhere in Alberta, in Canada, or anywhere in the world, but the main point is you should have 12 months of work experience. But if you are a graduate from a college in a designated rural community, then you don't need to meet the 12 months of work experience criteria, right? So this is the most important thing that a PGWP holder needs to check, right? So if by any chance you are a PGWP holder from a college which is operating in a rural community in Alberta, and that community is participating in the rural renewal scheme, then you don't need to meet the 12 months of work experience. So you can apply as soon as you get the PGWP. As soon as you start working under PGWP, you can apply under the rural renewal scheme. If you want to understand the details of the rural renewal scheme, I have many videos in my playlist. So go through those videos. You will understand the details of the rural renewal scheme, how to apply, what are the eligibility, who are eligible for rural renewal schemes, and things like that. And those things would be helpful. Okay, so I know this was a longish video, but I just wanted to cover all the PGWP questions in this one video, so that if you have any questions, you can just skip forward and backward and understand your question. So in summary, if you are a PGWP holder from Alberta, you could be eligible for AOS, and for that, please go through the AOS section. I have covered it in this video. I have other videos covering that, the eligibility for AOS. So there are quite a detailed requirements for AOS that I just covered a few minutes back. If you are interested in the Alberta Express entry, then there are no special requirements as far as Aaip is concerned. Okay. Uh, if you are interested in rural renewal scheme, as I was just explaining, there are no special requirements. In fact, you get a benefit if you have a PGWP from a Alberta Rural Community College. Okay, so that is the advantage that rural renewal schemes offers you, right? So to each his or her own. I hope this video is helpful to you, and if you have any questions, you know how to reach me, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.